Welcome to HQ Spotlight on CBS Sports Network. I'm Tommy Tran, next to Jacqueline D'Agostino, and to my far left, Mike O'Donnell. And if Mike O'Donnell's here, that means we're talking college basketball. Great to have MOD with us here in our South Florida studios. A chalky men's Final Four in San Antonio, guys.
Yes.
Just the second time all one seeds have made it this far, and the first time since 2008.
Yeah, and it all kicks off with an SEC matchup where we have Auburn and Florida going head-to-head. These two teams, as both of you all know, met in the regular season. Florida was able to take care of their business, but, of course, it's hard to beat a great team twice. MOD, Janai Broome, is he going to be 100%? His health is a big topic of conversation in terms of Auburn.
No, I have no insider knowledge. I don't think he's going to be 100% though. I have hyperextended my elbow. It hurts really, really bad.
Yeah.
If you are medically cleared by the doctors, the team doctors, you know that going into that game, it's going to hurt throughout the whole game. It's going to be very painful, but if it's structurally sound, it's like having a sprained ankle on your upper body. He'll be able to fight through it. It's going to be tough, though.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough when you have Florida, who has size, who has depth, but man, a lot of close calls in the tournament, Mike O'Donnell. A lot of nail biters to get here. Do you think that they're going to have to play perfect? You can't be playing a nail biter against Auburn, right?
Everything's about turnovers for Florida. If they don't get off to a slow start, they've had double-digit turnovers their last 3 games. That's a huge deal. The Gators have to play more efficiently on the offensive end to get it done versus Auburn.
So that's one national semifinal. If we get to the other, Mike, the Houston Cougars under Kelvin Sampson, they have been fantastic over the years in defense, but how good is this year's defensive team?
This is one of the this is really the last 25 years of college basketball. It's one of the best defenses that I've ever seen. They're the number 1 in Ken Palm in adjusted defensive efficiency. They steal, deflections, rebound, get out and run. Toughness is the name of the game, and Houston has all of it.
And they'll have to beat a very good Duke team that has an excellent freshman in Cooper Flagg, can enter rare territory, win a title, and be the first overall pick. What stands out to you about number 2?
My goodness, you want to talk about offensive firepower. The number 1 team in the country in terms of offensive adjusted efficiency, not just this season, but for the last 25 years. We've never seen a team this good on the offensive side of the floor. The Blue Devils are elite.
And we've seen only 4 instances where players have won an NCAA championship and then were the top overall pick in the NBA. That has been since the merger in 1976, and Cooper Flagg does have that opportunity this weekend. By the way, there will be the late game on Saturday at CBS. They are also, the Duke Blue Devils, the betting favorite to win the tournament in San Antonio at even money. Jacqueline's Gators are next at plus 280. You see Houston and Auburn there second, or rather third and fourth on the board.
All right, so back here we have Trey Demps, who is joining the party because, as noted by Tommy Tran, it's all chalk, it's all one seed, so we kind of have to find different ways to differentiate the conversation, the strengths, the weaknesses of all of these one seeds. We are talking about strengths, gentlemen, and of course we are going to start with the betting favorite, the Duke Blue Devils. Trey, we'll kick it out to you first. What are their strengths? I know we listed off, of course, the offensive firepower, and when you have a guy like Cooper Flagg on your team, it certainly doesn't hurt, does it?
Absolutely not. And Cooper Flagg is one of the best collegiate players we've seen probably in the last 5 to 10 years. But for me, it's defensively and their ability to switch 1 through 5. And even Malawach, who is a big, can get out and guard perimeter players. We saw that in their last matchup. Mark Sears shot 2 of 12 from the field, where Cooper Flagg had him a little bit. And so their ability to have guys that can guard multiple positions. You think about Sion James as the point guard that's about 6'5", and Tyrese Proctor, who's 6'4", 6'5" as well. They can switch and be able to guard multiple positions, which limits teams' ball movement.
What's really interesting about this Duke team, Trey just mentioned the size of Proctor and James in the backcourt. And that's a big backcourt when you got essentially 6'4" and 6'5", 6'6" as your backcourt. Nobody ever talks about how big Duke's roster is. They're actually top 10 in the nation in roster average height. And so from a defensive versatility standpoint, that's a huge deal where you could have your point guard switching on a forward or center and really not miss a beat. As much as we talk about their offensive efficiency, they're pretty elite on the defensive end, though the ACC wasn't as difficult as the SEC or the Big 12 or in the Big East. This is still an excellent defensive team. So their size is something that we don't talk enough about. But Duke's ability, because of their height, and especially Malawach, who can operate in the low post, he can also operate at the top of the key. He's such a gifted passer. And then defensively, they can switch all 5 positions virtually every single time that they play. That's what makes him so difficult to scout against. I mean, even a guy like Con Knipler, everybody talks about his offense, very underrated defender, very versatile defender, really good on both ends of the floor. I mean, there's so much to like about this Duke team.
And I'm glad at least one play in that highlight rip we had was a lob, because it seems like he gets at least one every game, and they run that offensively here. On the flip side with Houston, Troy, what strength stands out to you the most about Go Cougs?
Well, again, I think it's defensively, and I think their ability to play aggressive yet disciplined is so fun to watch as a fan. And you see so many teams defensively that are aggressive. A lot of times they get out of position, they gamble, they go for steals. But this Houston defense has the ability to get out into the passing lanes when the opportunity presents itself, to pressure the basketball, keep the ball in front. And then also when they put two on the basketball, when their bigs are hard hedging, everybody's on a string and connected. We saw that against Purdue, where Braden Smith, even though he had 15 assists, really struggled to make plays at certain times. This Houston defense is as good as it comes.
This is a tough matchup for Duke. This is probably the worst matchup they could have gotten in the Final Four, because Duke is so good at exploiting weaknesses against defenses, especially in the half court. But there are no weaknesses in Houston's half court defense. They play at one of the slowest tempos in the country, not because they don't want to run, because their defense forces you to play the entire 30 seconds of the shot clock. Whether you like it or not, you don't get a shot early. You don't get a shot with 15 seconds on the shot clock. You have to make a shot with 5 seconds or less on the clock. So you're not only taking difficult shots, you're usually taking rushed shots against Houston. And so when you talk about Houston, Trey just mentioned one of the more elite defenses we have seen in the last decade. They're also an elite rebounding team. The physicality of Houston could really, really bother Duke in this game.
Yeah, I remember in that game against Tennessee in the Elite Eight, I had to do a double take on how many points that they were allowing.
They held Tennessee to 50.
It was crazy.
50.
I know.
Wild.
Let's go to Florida and the other matchup with the two teams. And Florida, we talk a lot, Mike, about their size, their depth, but it's impossible to not, talk about Florida without mentioning Walter Clayton Jr.
Have to mention Walter Clayton Jr. He's probably the most underappreciated point guard in the last decade of college basketball. Does not get enough love. He's going to go down as one of the all-time great Florida Gator players. And I know that makes you really excited, Jacqueline, to hear that, right? All the hot takes.
Music to my ears,
I know. So one thing that he does that doesn't get talked about enough is actually his pick and roll action. He was the best player in the SEC analytically at scoring out of pick and roll action. Now, a lot of that is credit to how big this Florida Gators front court is and how versatile they are in their pick and roll action. But there's so much. I was trying to think of like a player comp for him. There's a lot of Deron Williams in his game. And he's got that Steph Curry clutch shot making ability that we saw the last two games that if he's not making shots, we're not talking about Florida in the Final Four. So he has the clutch gene, he has the shiftiness of Deron Williams. That's the reason why he's an All-American.
Yeah, those are great points, Mike. And I think to go along with that, when you have shooters around you that are able to make not only three-point shots, but deeper three-point shots, I think that causes so many problems for opposing teams. And you look at their roster, Martin, Richard, even Houck as a big, those guys can make NBA range threes. And so what does that do? That creates longer closeouts. As Walter Clayton is coming off of those pick and rolls, he can kind of pick whether he wants to make plays for himself, whether he wants to get the ball to the roller, or whether he's able to kick it out to one of those deadly three-point shooters. And also I think with this Florida team, it's their ability to stay composed in high-pressure situations. You see in the last matchups in the NCAA tournament, they were down big time to Texas Tech, 9 points with 3 minutes to go. They never lost their composure. They stayed true to themselves, got the ball into their playmakers' hands, and were able to close out those games.
And here we are, one of 4 1 seeds at the Final Four, but last but not least, the Auburn Tigers. What's the biggest strength to you, Mike O'Donnell?
So for Auburn, it usually comes down to their offensive firepower. I know we talked a lot about that with Duke, but Auburn is just relentless in how they come in waves constantly. They have size on the wing. They have size in the front court. I don't know how you scout for Janai Broome, right? You throw a big at him, he takes you up top. You throw a smaller guy at him, he takes you down low. And so it's exhausting to prepare for this Auburn team. And if you look at Janai Broome's game, his game just kind of mirrors what Auburn does so well. They have old school physicality with modern versatility. And that's the best way to describe this Auburn team, is they play flex offense, right? The last team to play flex offense was in the 1970s, but that's what they run. And they pound it inside, but they have a little bit of modern twist and flair to how they orchestrate it. And Janai Broome is so good at it. And when you have a guy like Tad Pettiford coming off the bench that can shoot threes, that's going to be the one thing. And I know their firepower, they come in waves, relentlessness, that's a big thing. Auburn shot just over 30% from three since the SEC tournament. Can't be that bad against Florida. They have to make threes against the Gators.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's their ability to go on big runs. I mean, we've seen throughout the NCAA tournament against Michigan State in that first half, they went on a 14-0 run. And then against Michigan, they went on a 30-8 run. And so they have the ability to kind of stay into the game, keep it close. And then at a certain point, when teams start to go cold, especially off of long rebounds, they're able to get out in transition. They have so many weapons offensively, and they're able to kind of go on those big runs. And also, I think when you look at this Auburn team, too, it's just their firepower and how unselfish they are to get the ball into the hot hand, whether it's the hot Pettiford one night, whether it's Miles Kelly, Denver Jones has had big nights. And so I just think their ability to feed the hot hand and have so many options offensively, and they have the unselfishness to say, you know what, whoever it is, whether it's Pettiford coming off pick and rolls, Janai Broome playing in the post, we're going to feed the hot hand and we're going to celebrate whoever's got it going in their success.
Trey, Mike, we certainly appreciate it going through all of the strengths, although my heart says Florida. I don't know that my head is any more convinced about anybody else because all of these teams are just that good. It is all going down, kicking off from San Antonio on Saturday. Starts with Florida and Auburn, 6:09 Eastern. The other one, Houston and Duke. And, of course, you can watch all these on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus as well.
Let's welcome in Kyle Boone here. We've talked about all these teams and their strengths, just how good they are, specifically with teams like Houston and their defense. Let's talk about the weaknesses here. Kyle, I'll start with you in this one. Where's the weakness for the Houston Cougars?
Yeah, Amanda, let's be clear. First of all, some caveats. These are all 4 number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament. They were the 4 best teams during the regular season. So you're picking nits a little bit, but I think if you want to pick an Achilles heel for this Houston team, it's that they don't really have a go-to post scorer, and they really are not very good, efficient at scoring in the post. Synergy data actually has them in the 29th percentile in post-up scoring this season. That's clearly the worst among all Final Four teams. They make that up with great three-point shooting. They are number 2 in three-point shooting this season among all college basketball teams. They have a great backcourt. LJ Cryer, Milos Uzan, and they have some flashes down low as well. Juwan Roberts and Javier Francis can give them buckets in a pinch, but against Duke's really deep front line and Kamon Malawach and Cooper Flagg, I don't think Houston is going to have a lot of fun and a lot of success trying to score down low in this game.
It's a good point that Kyle brings up. Houston doesn't really have a player over 6'9" that is consistent, inside of that rotation. So that's an issue. But Kyle said, we're nitpicking here. And the reason why we're nitpicking is because Houston's still one of the best rebounding teams in the country, even though they lack that size. But a big thing for me is those scoring droughts for Houston. And they will, because of their tempo, they play at one of the slowest tempos in the country, 320th in tempo. But it's really the way they play defense. So they want lower possessions because they want to make you play for the entirety of the shot clock, all 30 seconds. You don't get a shot at the beginning. You don't get a shot in the middle. You're forced to take a shot with 5 seconds or less. So that slows the game down, which coincidentally means less possessions. So if they have scoring droughts at all, it may feel like they're constantly playing behind. You cannot go through a scoring drought playing against Duke and how good that offense is.
We're looking at each team's weakness that another team could attack. One thing Houston does have is grown-ass men. Right? I mean, some of these guys, Mike, they were on this Houston team.
I couldn't play for Houston.
When Cooper Flagg was in middle school.
That's right.
Right?
That's
so
right.
that has to be a weakness that they can try to attack with Duke, right? I know they're more talented, but they're also younger and less experienced.
Yeah, I think it's kind of 1A, 1B, physicality and experience, right? The weaknesses for Duke of where, number one, this will be the most physical and tough team that Duke has faced all season. And I know they played Auburn, but that's the closest team to Houston, but they will have never faced a more connected, a more dialed in, a more physical, a more gap heavy defense than Houston's half-court defense. And so that's going to be a big key for Duke, is how they manage that physicality. But also, they're a freshman-led team. Houston is not. They have seniors that are their leaders. That is something that they're going to look to exploit as well.
Kyle, you buy in that Houston can attack Duke's inexperience, more like men versus boys here?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a good point here, and I think Houston coming into this game can maybe play into the role of being the underdog and maybe rib Duke along the way and say, hey, look, we're playing you to within a possession and it's halftime. And you guys are heavy favorites, not in this game, but also in the NCAA tournament. The expectations for this relatively young Duke team as very heavy title favorites. I think heavy wears the crown for this Blue Devils team. And I remember talking to Clark Kellogg earlier this season about Duke specifically, and it's like, we like what we've seen from this Duke team, but you never know how young guys are going to react in big situations. They're 35-3 on the season, so I'd say the results are overwhelmingly good, but you have your top two scorers on this Duke team are true freshmen, and yes, they're projected top 10 picks in Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple, but against this Houston team that is very experienced, very physical, as Mike said, I think it's going to be a real test for this Duke team.
Do you know how I know Kyle? I think, in your words, as a grown-ass man.
How's that?
I'm pretty sure I saw him last week, and he did not have that goatee.
Yeah, he can grow facial hair. Mike O'Donnell cannot. So
super fast.
It's true. It only hurts because it's true.
Like it
very
though, Kyle.
beard envy.
That's the late game on Saturday. The early one is Auburn going up against Florida here. Of course, the big concern for Auburn over the course of the week has been the health of Johni Broome. He did practice today, dealing with that elbow injury. Where else can Florida attack Auburn, Kyle?
I think that's the big question, Amanda, is Broome's status. Obviously, he injured himself in the Elite Eight, goes down with, it looked like he tweaked his ankle there a little bit, but also his elbow bothering him, and missed practice several times this week, returned and said he will be at 100% by this weekend. Not entirely sure I'm buying that. And, I think more to the point, as Bruce Pearl alluded to earlier today, I think a lot of people are kind of expecting that at some point Broome will fizzle, his play will fizzle. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but the accumulation of injuries for Johni Broome, I think at some point has to be discussed. He had an ankle injury that he's been dealing with for several weeks. He had a shoulder injury earlier this season. Now he's dealing with an elbow injury. It's just kind of been one thing after another. And on top of that, he started the month of March with 2 single-digit scoring performances. He hasn't been the clear #1 player in college basketball for the last month, like he was throughout the heart of college basketball season. So I think for Auburn to win this game, they need Johni Broome to be bulletproof. They need him to be awesome. And with injuries kind of mounting with him, I think there's a real question of how Broome will play and if he can be as effective as he was earlier in the season.
One of the biggest issues with Auburn, which is kind of odd to say, is actually rebounding. And when you look at this Auburn team, they're actually, amongst this Final Four group, they have the worst rebounding and offensive rebounding rate in the Final Four. And if you go back and you look at that matchup, when they played Florida, when they lost to Florida, that was the first kind of light switch turn on nationally for the Florida Gators of where, wow, this team could be a legitimate Final Four team when they beat Auburn. Alex Condon and Thomas Houck combined for 33 points and 19 rebounds. They were completely dominant on the front court and the interior. And I think rebounding, not saying it in a cliche way, I mean, they have to be like perfect. Like every box out has to be perfect, has to be to a point, to a man, from Pettiford to Broome. They have to be absolutely relentless on the glass because Florida thrives getting extra possessions on the offensive glass.
Going to need more than just a one-arm Johni Broome like we saw at the end of that Elite Eight game, but he says he's going to be 100% for Saturday. Florida, on the other hand, who led that first matchup by as many as 21, really dominated, has not been doing that in the tournament. I mean, they have trailed for more time than any of these teams in the Final Four, Mike. They've shown to be the most vulnerable. So how does Auburn attack Florida's weakness, and what is that specific weakness?
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting ready to be really aggressive here on Florida. They absolutely deserve to be in the Final Four. They're one of the best teams in the country. They were one of the best teams in the regular season. But turnovers are a major, major issue for the Florida Gators. In particular, if you look at their last 3 NCAA tournament games that they won, all double-digit turnovers, which led to those scoring droughts and them having to come from behind to try to win games. They essentially relied on Walter Clayton Jr. to put up Steph Curry-like three-point shots to will them back into winning. Turnovers are an issue. And when you turn the ball over against Auburn, Auburn's one of the best teams in the country at getting kill shots, that magical 10-0 run. Everybody's searching for at least one 10-0 run throughout the game when you dive into the analytics side of it. But that's a big deal. Valuing each possession, not getting careless, and staying in attack mode without over-dribbling, because Auburn's wings, the post, they can all deflection steal, get out and run, and that's when Auburn feels relentless to play against.
And to Mike's point, Kyle, they were outscored in points off turnovers 22-5 in that game against Texas Tech and somehow overcame it.
Yeah, no, and I think with this Florida team in particular, kind of a bunch of pyrotechnics. They seem to really like to play with fire. I don't know what it is about this Florida team, but it's like they like to have their backs against the wall. They want to feel something before they decide to show up in the game. And I feel like eventually you play with fire, you get burned, right? And in the second round against UConn, they trailed by 6 in the second half, end up winning that game. They trailed by 10. In the second half versus Texas Tech. They end up winning that game. And Walter Clayton can only be a superhero for so many moments for this Florida team. So, I think Florida has to start strong in this game. They have to control this game early against Auburn. I think if Auburn end up in a position in the second half where they are leading and they're controlling this game, I don't know if Florida has another a bailout moment from Walter Clayton in them. So I think Florida starting strong and not getting behind late in the second half will be key for the Gators in this one.
Kyle Boone and Mike O'Donnell previewing the Final Four. They'll be part of our coverage all weekend long. Mike is going to be here in studio, and it's so big that they're actually bringing me in on a Saturday for a 2-hour pregame show.
I'm going to try to grow a goatee by Saturday.
By which Saturday? This Saturday or one like 4 months from
2026.
Yeah. The games will start just after 6 o'clock Eastern time on CBS and Paramount Plus. Florida, Auburn in the first game. Houston, Duke in the second game. We'll have coverage from out there live at the Final Four beginning on Friday.